Hi, everyone. I'm Rosemarie Miller here with James Demmert, the founder and chief investment officer of Main Street Research. Thank you so much for joining me today, James.
My pleasure, Rosemary.
So, James, let's get into Oracle and their earnings reaction. So, Oracle suggested sales of $13.28 billion for its third quarter were right on target, but investors seem to be focusing on its cloud revenue and artificial intelligence prospects. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's this is an interesting day for Oracle. I think a lot hinged on this report. And as shareholders know, the last two quarters in a row they've disappointed, and then sort of guided that it would get better, and then it didn't. So this is, I think, one of those times where they really needed to get there, and the report suggests they did. They beat on the earnings, and as you mentioned, they squeaked by on the revenues. What I would say, really close. But investors are cheering that. I think they should. This is like the little engine that could, it appeared, for a few quarters. And now it seems like it's starting to get momentum. And, this is an AI tech-led new bull market, is what we like to say. And it's important that each company that wants to participate executes well. And I think for a couple of quarters there, they weren't. But now you're starting to see cloud services, which is a really important metric that we were looking at, coming in better than expected expectations this quarter. Really happy to see that. And then we can also talk about the data center expansion, which is important.
Well, James, could you explain Oracle's strategy for competing in the cloud computing market?
Well, it's an interesting, whenever you're in a phase of transformational technology change, like AI is, or let's say the internet was in the 90s, there's sort of the beginning phase and then the second phase, and then there's these phases after. And the first phase is the semi business, which you can tell, right? Obviously, the NVIDIAs and the AMDs. And then it's the question of, okay, which of the companies are going to lever the AI technology, right, to really make a robust business? And that would be the Googles, the Metas, and definitely the Oracles and the sales forces. And so really what Oracle's been trying to do is build out a very robust data center, which they can sort of run this cloud services on. So according to Katz, the CFO, and Allison, there is more demand for their brand of cloud service than they have been able to serve. And that's because their big strategy has been, hey, let's make a lot of money. Let's spend a lot of money on this data center expansion, so we can try to keep up with that demand. And that is a very critical issue when you're in that transformational phase, right? It's an arms race, to kind of be the first at market and be robust. So really, that's their strategy. You can imagine it's challenging, between how much expense you have for a quarter and how much revenue you're taking in. I think that's why those last two quarters disappointed investors, but this one didn't.
Well, while it's been successful for them, how is it compared to its competitors like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google?
Well, again, they've been the little engine that could. So I think it hasn't compared well. Companies like Google or Microsoft or Amazon, even Salesforce, which is a close competitor to Oracle, have executed this transition faster, better. And I think that's where investors were really, they beat the stock up the last time they missed and the time before. And I think it's because institutional investors like ourselves just said, wait, there's other companies that are harnessing the power of AI and they're executing extremely well. I'll just own those instead. So I would say they get a C minus for the last two quarters, but now it's a B plus with this report. And I think that investors should recognize here, they were a little off on their data center expansion plans, maybe a little slow, but now they've got momentum. So this is a time I wouldn't be giving up on the shares here. I think they're just again the little engine that could.
Mhm. And so, speaking of the third quarter, what contributed to the 7.1% increase in total sales for its physical Third quarter.
Yeah, it really, half the revenue, more than that, is cloud services, and that's really what shined. In fact, some of the other smaller parts of their business model were not. They were a bit of a disappointment. Not by much. They missed just a few metrics here and there, but cloud services blew away. and really made up for where the revenue was soft. And, I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, their future is cloud services and data center. And so, less focus on those other smaller businesses is fine with us. I think that's what we really want to see is they take a big chunk, a big lead, and a lot of market share. Safra, speaking of which, she mentioned that they've got some very large contracts in the third quarter for cloud services. And so I'm really interested to hear more on the call, which is happening as we're talking. But I'll go back and listen to the recording. I'm really curious more about, what kind of contracts they got signed in the third. And of course, what the guidance is for next quarter. I think that's going to be a really key here issue because past guidance has not been great as far as results.
James, could you discuss some of their specific products like the Fusion software and NetSuite? I mean, how did they perform in the quarter compared to previous periods?
They missed. They missed in almost every smaller segment, but not by much. They was close, but they did miss the estimates on each of those. And I'm actually surprised because I think investors have it right. I mean, I'm surprised investors maybe were a little bit more mixed about that report, maybe sell the stock off a bit, but clearly they're not. I think investors have recognized that, hey, cloud services being half the revenue, maybe it's going to be 3/4 of the revenue, 2 or 3 quarters from now. I think investors are recognizing, yeah, those are important, but they're not as important as cloud. So even though they missed on each of those other segments, I think investors are pretty much saying, yeah, those are not as meaningful. Where the real growth in Oracle is going to be in the data center cloud services business.
So, where does Oracle stand in the cloud computing industry after its recent performance? I mean, what challenges and opportunities do you think lie ahead?
Yeah, I think for Ellison and Katz, it's really about better executing, this tremendous amount of investment in the data center so they can keep up with what they say is demand more than they can handle. That's a classic good problem if you're a business. But in the arms race of the new AI business cycle technology transformation, you're not being okay isn't good enough. I mean, that's why you're seeing stocks get bid up extremely well is in these companies that are executing extremely well. So up until now, they haven't. This may be the sign that's turned. And we're hopeful that that's the case. I'm also interested in, and you may be looking at this too, Rosemarie. Stock it's not overpriced. I mean, it's one of the cheapest AI plays, if you will. It's 19 times earnings in a world where they're all trading at 30 or 35 times earnings. So that does make it somewhat interesting as well.
Okay. Well, is there anything else on your radar, James, that you believe should be on ours regarding Oracle?
I think when the numbers come out, you see the after hours pop, the stock's up 10%. That's always exciting, but I always caution investors, as I will my team. Let's listen to the call. Let's listen to what Katz and Ellison say about guidance. Maybe let's break down, some of the sources of revenue. I think in this market, be very careful, be thorough. And I think in this case, patience was helpful. We've been shareholders for a couple quarters, and our patience looks like it's becoming rewarding. So always be patient and always do your homework. Those would be my comments.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, James.
My pleasure, Rosemary.